Why did her words cut deeper than any bullet I'd ever faced? Her voice carried across the ballroom, sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. You've always been a nobody, Morgan. It landed harder than the glass shattering against the marble floor. The music froze midair, violins suspended in silence, and all eyes turned toward me. My sister Avery, perfect Avery, the one draped in silk, bathed in chandeliers, smiling at the man she believed was her prize. For everyone in that vineyard, this night was meant to be her coronation. But for me, it was a reckoning I had carried for years. I didn't move. My heels pressed into the polished floor, steady, deliberate. The chaos spun around me, guests gasping, tuxedos scattering, champagne spilling like liquid bells. I stood still, a Marine in a place where no one expected a Marine to stand. What they didn't know, what Avery refused to believe, was that I wasn't just her forgotten sister anymore. I was Captain Morgan Hale, and tonight wasn't about a wedding. Tonight was about truth. But to understand why I crashed her perfect day, you'd have to go back. Back to the house where silence taught me more than words ever did. Growing up, Avery's face on every wall. Newspaper clippings pinned to the refrigerator, her winning charity ribbons, her glossy photos from the society page, framed smiles from galas where she sparkled like a diamond. She was the daughter my parents bragged about, the one who could do no wrong. And then there was me, the shadow slipping in and out of rooms, the name half forgotten at family introductions, the one who could never shine bright enough to compete with the golden child. I still remember that Thanksgiving, the table heavy with casseroles, turkey steaming, wine glasses catching the firelight. Avery's voice carried as she described penthouses in New York, designer bags, parties filled with people whose names carried weight. My parents leaned in, laughing, urging her to tell the story again. And me, I cleared my throat. I mentioned quietly that I had just been awarded a Marine commendation, something I'd bled for, something that meant everything to me. My father gave me a distracted smile, the kind you offer to someone interrupting a better conversation. Then he pivoted back, eager to hear Avery's story about city lights. The applause that followed wasn't for me. It never was. I remember chewing slowly, pretending the burn in my throat was nothing, pretending it didn't matter. My mother chuckled to her friends, glass of wine tipping slightly in her hand. Morgan's so serious, almost like a boy, but Avery's our real girl. The words lodged inside me, sharp and permanent. I kept my face still. I stayed silent. Silence became my shield, but beneath it an ache grew into something harder, something that waited. So when Avery flashed her diamond ring years later at a wine bar in Napa, everyone cheered. Everyone saw the perfect engagement, the man of wealth and charm at her side. Dmitri Koval, older, polished, exuding the kind of power my parents worshipped. They glowed as if all their sacrifices were being repaid in full. But as the chandelier light refracted off that diamond, my stomach tightened, because I'd seen those numbers before. Offshore accounts, Delaware LLCs, shell companies snaking across continents. I had traced them once, long nights hunched over intel reports, connecting dots no one wanted to see. What Avery paraded as success, I recognized as a red flag. That night the phone rang. My mother's voice softened into that pleading tone I knew too well. "Morgan, please don't make things difficult. Just smile. Let your sister shine." She didn't ask how I was, didn't care what I knew. She only wanted peace at the table, even if it was built on rot. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles whitened. Words pressed against my throat, truths I had carried like weight plates in training. I wanted to rip away the illusion, to scream the danger wrapped around Avery's fairy tale. But I didn't. I swallowed hard, and silence answered for me. When the call ended, I sat alone in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. My pulse hammered, and in that silence a decision took shape. If my family chose image over justice, then I would choose justice, even if it meant tearing their perfect world apart. The next morning, I walked into NCIS with a plan burning in my chest. The conference room buzzed low, lit by maps stretched across the wall. Arrows cut through oceans. Shipping lines converged on ports I knew too well. I stepped forward, setting papers down with a thud. "This wedding," I said, pointing at Napa Valley on the board, "isn't just a family affair. It's a gathering point. Dimitri's entire network will be there. Relaxed, arrogant, convinced they're untouchable, and I'm the one person they'll never suspect." The room went silent. My superior leaned forward, voice clipped. "Captain Hale, your liaison only. Civilian authorities lead, you support." The words stung. A reminder that even here, even in the mission I had built, I was still being told to stay small. The district attorney leaned back, skeptical. "Without a warrant, we've got smoke, nothing more. You want us to crash a wedding? Prove it. Show us the trail." I slid the diagrams forward. Offshore transfers, shell corporations, a Delaware LLC, the same one that bought the diamond Avery flaunted like a trophy. The silence stretched. Then finally the DA tapped his pen, exhaled, and nodded. "Warrant granted." Later that night, in the quiet of my quarters, an agent handed me the final piece. A microtransmitter disguised as a silver dog tag. When I clasped it around my neck, the metal pressed cold against my skin. Pride, betrayal, family, duty, all of it bound in that single weight. I wasn't just risking a mission. I was putting my family's dream day directly in the crosshairs. But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It breaks through when it's ready. The rehearsal dinner sparkled with blush satin and champagne bubbles. Avery stood at the center, her friends orbiting her like planets. She caught my eye, smirked, and raised her voice just loud enough for the table. "My sister Morgan, nobody all her life, finally useful for once in a bridesmaid's dress." The laughter that followed hit harder than any punch I'd taken in training. I forced a smile, swallowing the burn, but inside it seared. When the night ended, I slipped outside into the cool air. The parking lot hummed with crickets. That's when a man brushed past me, sliding an envelope into my hand so discreetly it could have been nothing more than a touch. "Be careful," he murmured. "Not everyone here is here to celebrate." By the time I turned, he was gone. Inside the envelope, an invitation, a hilltop estate, a party I knew doubled as something else, a storage site, a vault. My pulse quickened. I didn't need the map to know what it meant. The wedding wasn't just a stage, it was a cover. And my family, they were already knee-deep in it without even knowing. If I stayed silent, they wouldn't just lose their illusions. They'd lose everything. So I made my choice. I would smile. I would wear the bridesmaid's dress. I would trail behind Avery, clipboard in hand, nodding at flowers and linens. But every step, every glance, every detail, I'd map it like a battlefield. Because the Marine in me was no longer willing to be invisible. And the storm was already gathering. How do you smile when you know the walls are about to fall? The morning light poured through the vineyard like liquid gold, touching the rows of grapes, the arched trellises draped in fairy lights that had been strung overnight. To everyone else, it looked like a dream, a perfect scene for a wedding. To me, it looked like a trap being dressed in silk. Avery walked ahead of me, her gown clipped at the waist as the seamstress pinned layers of white lace. She turned, twirling slightly, eyes searching for approval that she didn't need but always demanded. "Perfect, isn't it?" she said. I nodded, my face neutral, but my eyes weren't on her gown. They were on the exits, the side doors, the angle of the trellis, the slope of the vineyard road, every detail filed into memory, mapped like a battlefield. She thought I was there to support her, but in truth, I was charting the cracks in her castle. Carmen, her maid of honor, her best friend since college, stood nearby, fussing with a clipboard. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked off caterers and floral arrangements. I noticed it, even if Avery didn't, and I noticed something else. When Carmen thought no one was watching, a man from the audio crew passed her an envelope, heavy enough to pull on her wrist. Her smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she tucked it into her bag. I kept my expression calm, a polite smile curved on my lips, but inside alarm screamed. Later, while Avery argued over centerpieces, I drifted toward the sound equipment. My fingers grazed one of the black speaker cabinets. At first, it seemed ordinary until my nail tapped a seam that didn't belong. A false bottom, hollow space, the kind designed to hide something. I crouched, pressing lightly. The vibration was wrong, too solid for empty air, just the right size for a portable drive, a ledger. My pulse quickened. Proof, not rumor, not smoke, evidence that could tear Dimitri's empire to the ground. I straightened, slipping seamlessly back into the role of bridesmaid, smiling, nodding at roses as Avery gushed, oblivious. But beneath the calm mask, my thoughts raced. The ledger was here, and Carmen wasn't clean. That night I sat alone in the rental car parked at the edge of the vineyard. The rows of vines stretched like dark ribs under the moonlight. The air smelled of earth, damp and sweet, but it didn't soothe me. My gut twisted. A message had come in from our undercover team. One of our agents in Soma had been burned, barely escaping with his life. Dimitri's circle was spooked. The timeline scrambled. Scrolling through my notes, I saw it clearly now. The Hilltop estate wasn't just a party. It was the real deal. The table where Dimitri's associates would greenlight the Oakland shipment. The wedding was a performance. The fire waited in the hills. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion pressing down. My phone buzzed. A text from Avery. Ceremony moved up. 1 hour earlier. My stomach sank. Security rotations had changed too. Faces I didn't recognize now patrolled the grounds. The timing wasn't coincidence. Someone knew. A shuffle of gravel snapped me alert. My hand brushed the holster at my hip as a figure stepped into the wash of my dashboard light. It was him, the man from the bridal shower parking lot. He raised a palm quickly. Relax, his voice low, calm. He flashed a badge from Napa PD. I narrowed my eyes. What do you want? We've been testing you, he said. Needed to know if you were family first or law second. I leaned out the window, my voice steady. I've got the ledger. Dimitri's using the afterparty to move forward. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the vineyard glowing in the distance. Then we're on the same side. He melted back into the shadows, and I sat there, the cold truth settling in. Dimitri's empire was spooked. The timeline scrambled, and my family's perfect day was hanging by a thread. One wrong step now, and it wouldn't just be their illusions that shattered. It would be everything they had ever clung to. Their home, their name, their pride. The morning of the wedding arrived too bright, too sharp. The vineyard glittered like a stage set for a dream, fairy lights strung across trellises, chandeliers swaying in the breeze above the ballroom. Guests began to arrive in silk and tuxedos, laughter bubbling like champagne. And me, I stood at the edge, every sense sharpened, every heartbeat echoing like a drum. Avery glided past in her gown, radiant, flawless, her smile sculpted for cameras. She leaned close as she spun with Dimitri, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. You're still nobody here, Morgan. Her voice was silk folded around steel, each syllable a cut. Dimitri smirked, approval stamped across his face. For a moment, the ache inside me cracked wide open. Every dismissal, every time I'd been silenced, every Thanksgiving where my words had drowned under Avery's applause. But then Dimitri spoke, low in Russian. To anyone else it was nothing, a whisper between a groom and his mother. But to me, trained, fluent, it was a flare, a sequence of numbers, the confirmation code. Oakland. The shipment, the very thing we had chased across continents, was being blessed right here, under chandeliers and fairy lights. He thought language was his cloak. He thought wrong. I lifted my hand to the silver dog tag at my neck, my thumb pressed against the hidden transmitter. To anyone watching, it looked like nostalgia, a Marine remembering. But my lips moved, barely audible, 2 words: Iron Raven. Soft enough to drown beneath violins, strong enough to split the night in half. Floodlights erupted, bleaching the fairy glow into white fire. The ballroom doors slammed open. Agents surged in formation, voices barking commands. Guests screamed. Crystal shattered. Chairs overturned as panic rippled through the perfect dream. Dimitri froze, his smirk faltering for the first time. 2 HSI agents slammed him against the wall, steel cuffs biting his wrists. His arrogance drained, replaced by raw rage in his eyes. Avery stumbled, her veil snagging on a chair, silk dragging through broken glass. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her crown of perfection shattered around her. The crowd scattered, but my family didn't move. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble. My father's chest heaved, his face pale as parchment. And Avery fell to her knees. Her cries echoed, raw, hysterical, disbelieving. She reached toward me, fingers trembling. "Morgan, what have you done?" The lead agent stepped forward, his voice steady, commanding. He looked directly at me. "Captain Hale, confirmation." Every head turned, every eye fixed on me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow. I wasn't the daughter overlooked at the table. I was the Marine who brought the storm. And I gave a single, steady nod. What happens when the storm clears, when silence is all that's left? The ballroom emptied in fragments, sirens fading into the vineyard night. Agents carried boxes, hard drives, shattered glass crunching under their boots. The chandeliers still trembled from the chaos. And my family, they sat there, frozen, as though moving might confirm the truth they'd spent years denying. Hours later, I found myself in the sterile glow of the Napa District Attorney's office. The room smelled of paper and cold coffee. My boots echoed against linoleum as I walked in, dog tag pressing cool against my chest. On the table lay a stack of records, offshore accounts, wire transfers, and on top, the single sheet that made my father's hands tremble, the mortgage contract. His signature sprawled across the bottom, tying our family home to Dimitri's winery investment. His voice broke as he tried to explain. I didn't know. They said it was clean money, just a partnership." The DA didn't look up. "It was laundering, signed in your name." My mother sat beside him, rigid, pale. Her hands clenched white around her glass of water. She had clung to appearances her entire life, and now they shattered under fluorescent lights. Across the table, Carmen folded her hands, her eyes swollen red. "I was drowning," she whispered. "I had debts. I thought if I helped Dimitri move the money just once, I could pay it off. He promised no one would get hurt." Her voice cracked. "I hid the ledger in the speaker cabinet, every transfer, every shell company. I swear I didn't mean." Her words dissolved into sobs. The DA slid her a tissue, but his eyes stayed sharp. Intent doesn't erase evidence. And then Avery, my sister. She burst forward, mascara smeared, her voice climbing. "I didn't know, you have to believe me. Dimitri never told me. I thought he loved me." The DA didn't flinch. He slid a phone across the table. On the screen were messages, old texts from a friend warning her that Dimitri's deal smelled rotten, warnings she had ignored. Her face collapsed, tears streaked the mask she had worn for years. "I didn't see," she whispered. "I didn't want to see." I sat still, hands folded, watching. Because this wasn't just about Dimitri anymore. This was about choice. The choice my family had made over and over again to ignore the truth for the sake of image, to silence me, to silence reality. Later that night, alone in my quarters, my laptop glowed against the dark. An email notification blinked. The subject line, "Please." It was from Avery. Paragraphs poured out, apologies tangled with excuses. She begged me to forgive her, to believe she was blind, not complicit, that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she had been trapped in the glow of something she thought was love. I read the first lines, then my finger hit delete. Months ago, when my mother whispered please over the phone, I had stayed silent out of guilt, out of duty. This time, my silence was different. It wasn't surrender. It was a line, a boundary I refused to let anyone cross again. I wasn't the daughter who swallowed pain anymore. The morning after, I ran along the San Diego pier. The ocean rolled thick with fog, waves striking the pylons with steady rhythm. My lungs burned with clean pain. My boots struck a cadence on the boards. In my pack, folded neat, was the training plan for the new unit I'd been assigned to lead. A dozen young Marines, their eyes sharp with respect, their voices steady. "Yes, ma'am," crisp, certain. They were the family I had chosen, bound not by blood but by trust, by purpose. Halfway down the pier, my phone buzzed. Another email from Avery. Just one line this time. "I want to start over, no excuses." I slowed, reading the words. The ocean surged beneath me, unbothered by human promises. I let the message sit. Then I tapped mark as unread and slid the phone back into my pocket. Because I didn't need apologies to know my worth. I didn't need recognition. For years I had been branded a nobody, overlooked, dismissed, silenced. But when it mattered most, I had brought the storm that shattered illusions. And now, standing steady against the pier's wooden rail, the salt air filling my chest, I knew the truth. Value isn't given, it's claimed. And silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes silence is dignity. Sometimes silence is the line no one else dares to cross. What do you do when strangers believe in you more than your own blood ever did? The barracks smelled of new paint and steel polish. Boots thudded against the concrete floor in rhythm, young voices echoing commands I had once stumbled through myself. Now those voices turned toward me. Captain Hale, their leader. 12 Marines, 12 sets of eyes, some too sharp, some too green. They looked at me as if I carried every answer. They didn't know the cracks under my armor, the silence I carried, the weight of a family that had never once seen me this way. "Ma'am," a lance corporal stood at attention, crisp and nervous. "Unit assembled." I nodded, my face steady. Inside, my chest tightened. These Marines weren't just recruits. They were my responsibility. Their failures would be my failures, their survival my duty. I scanned their faces. Private Vasquez, 20 years old, with a gaze that refused to blink even when his jaw trembled. Corporal Jensen, tattoos coiled down his arm, masking hands that shook when he thought no one noticed. And Taylor, my youngest, barely out of high school, still carrying the softness of a kid who hadn't yet seen the world bite back. They didn't know me, not really, but they trusted me. That trust cut deeper than any medal, sharper than any dismissal I'd ever endured, because it was real. The training plan unfolded day by day, sweat dripping onto sand, grit grinding into skin. I pushed them hard, harder than they expected, but harder still I pushed myself. And yet at night, when the weight of the day settled, the silence returned. In the hum of the bass at 200 hours, my thoughts slipped back to Avery, to the house I'd grown up in, to the eyes that had never looked at me with the same faith these Marines now did. One night Vasquez caught me staring out across the parade ground, arms folded tight. He approached carefully. "Permission to speak, ma'am." I glanced at him, surprised. "Granted." He hesitated, then said, We talk sometimes, the guys, about why you push so hard. Some think you're proving something. Some think you just don't trust us yet." His words hit sharper than he knew, proving something. He didn't realize he'd named the war I fought daily. I forced a small smile. Maybe I'm proving it to myself. He didn't press, just nodded and stepped back into the shadows, but his words followed me into the night like ghosts. The following week, a training exercise took us to the desert. heat pressing like a weight, sand grinding into every crevice of gear and skin. The mission was simple: infiltrate, secure, extract. Simulated, of course, but nothing about the sun scorching our backs or the grit cutting our lungs felt fake. I watched as they moved across the terrain, Vasquez leading point, Taylor stumbling slightly under the weight of his pack but refusing to falter. I called commands, voice steady, each word carrying across the wind. And yet, even as I trained them, I heard Avery's voice. "Nobody, Morgan. You've always been a nobody." The heat blurred the horizon, but the echo was colder than any desert night. At the extraction point, Taylor collapsed to his knees, gasping. His canteen had long run dry. I crouched beside him, handing over mine without a word. He looked up at me, his face flushed, his hands shaking as he drank. "Why do you do it?" he rasped. "Do what?" "Push us this hard, carry so much. You don't have to." I stared out at the empty horizon. The sand shifted like water, endless. Because one day, no one will be there to carry you, and you'll have to stand anyway. His eyes widened slightly and he nodded, not fully understanding. Not yet, but one day he would. Back at base, I collapsed into my bunk, the silence pressing heavy. My body ached, my throat raw from commands shouted across miles of sand, and still I couldn't sleep. The email icon blinked. Avery, again. This one shorter, just 3 words: "Please forgive me." I stared at the screen, the glow painting my face pale in the dark. Forgive her. Forgive years of silence, of being invisible, of being called nobody. Forgive her for the way she looked at me at her wedding, as though I had ruined her life, when all I had done was stop it from being swallowed whole. I closed the laptop, didn't reply. Because forgiveness isn't an email. Forgiveness isn't words typed between breaths. Forgiveness is earned, and she had never fought for it. Weeks passed. The unit grew sharper, voices stronger, their movements more precise. They trusted me and I began to trust them, slowly, carefully. But inside I still wrestled with the same shadow, the question I could never shake. If the people who were supposed to love you had never seen your worth, could you ever truly believe it yourself? The answer didn't come easy. It came in fragments. In Vasquez refusing to quit during a brutal night march. In Taylor finally steadying his rifle without trembling. In Jensen breaking into a grin the first time he nailed the course under time. Each moment chipped away at the silence I carried. Each moment whispered a truth my family never had. That I was not nobody. That I never had been. Still, late at night, when the base quieted and the hum of lights filled the air, I found myself back at the pier, running, breathing, letting the ocean remind me that life didn't wait for apologies. One morning, as the sun burned gold across the water, I stopped, leaned against the rail, watched the waves break, relentless, unbothered. And I thought of Avery, of her single line, "I want to start over." Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't, but that was her battle, not mine. Mine was here, with the Marines who looked at me like I carried the answers, with the silence I had turned into strength, with the dignity that didn't need recognition. Because dignity doesn't beg, dignity doesn't shout. Dignity simply acts. What happens when the first test comes, and failure isn't just theory anymore? The desert training had been brutal, the pier runs relentless, the nights of silence heavier than sandbags, but all of that was just preparation. When the call came, I felt it in my chest like a door slamming shut. "Captain Hale," my commanding officer said, his tone clipped, almost clinical. "Your unit been cleared for field op. You'll deploy in 48 hours." The words hung in the air. Field op, not drills, not rehearsals, the real thing. I gave a sharp nod, masking the ache inside me. My unit was ready. I had drilled them past exhaustion, sharpened them until their movements carried weight and precision. And yet, leadership isn't about readiness. It's about what happens when readiness isn't enough. That night I sat at my desk, the mission packet open under the dull glow of a lamp. Operation: Sentinel Vale. Location: undisclosed valley near the border. Objective: track and intercept a weapons convoy rumored to be linked to Dimitri's network, the same shadows I had torn through at Avery's wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even miles away from Napa, the ghosts followed. I closed the folder, pressed my palms against it, and let out a slow breath. My sister's words echoed, uninvited. Nobody, Morgan. You've always been a nobody. I pushed the memory down, because tomorrow my Marines needed me to be everything but. Deployment day hit with a chill morning wind. The transport hummed under us as we strapped in, packs tight, weapons checked twice. The younger Marines fidgeted, their nerves seeping through despite their best attempts at stoicism. I scanned their faces. Vasquez chewing the inside of his cheek, eyes locked forward. Taylor staring at the floor, his lips moving like he was reciting a prayer. Jensen cracking his knuckles, the tattoos across his arms tightening with every motion. I leaned forward, voice steady. Listen up. Fear is normal. Doubt is normal. But when your boots hit the ground, you don't let either make your choices. You follow the plan. You follow each other. And you don't break. Their eyes lifted to mine. For a second, silence pressed thick. Then, one by one, they nodded. The transport rattled down and the desert swallowed us. Heat shimmered across the valley floor, jagged rocks cutting sharp against the horizon. The air was dry, metallic, the kind that burns your lungs if you breathe too deep. We moved fast, boots grinding into sand, weapons low, eyes scanning. The intel had mapped the convoy's route along a dirt pass carved between cliffs. Our job was to intercept, disrupt, secure intel, and extract. Simple on paper, nothing simple in reality. Hours passed, sweat soaked through uniforms. The sun dropped, casting the rocks in long shadows that looked too much like men crouched in wait. Every rustle of wind, every shift of sand tightened my chest. And then Vasquez froze. His fist shot up signal, he crouched low, pointing, dust plume, engines, the convoy. We moved into position, bodies sliding behind rock. I pressed my cheek against the scope, breath steady, eyes narrowing as the line of trucks rumbled into view. Covered beds, too many guards riding shotgun. My earpiece crackled, command's voice calm but detached. Captain Hale, confirm visual. I whispered, confirmed, 3 vehicles, armed escort. Proceed. I signaled my unit, hand sharp in the fading light. Positions tightened. Jensen set his rifle, Vasquez braced. Taylor's hands shook slightly but steadied as he exhaled. The convoy slowed. A guard climbed down, scanning the terrain. For a moment his eyes swept too close to our position. My pulse thudded. One wrong move and the mission would collapse before it began. But then something, a flicker at the edge of my scope, movement in the third truck. I zoomed, heart hammering, not weapons, not crates, people. 3 figures huddled in the back, blindfolded, hands bound, prisoners. I cursed under my breath. The mission packet had said nothing about civilians, nothing about lives caught in the crossfire. My earpiece crackled again. Captain Hale, green light, engage on your command. Engage, disrupt, extract, as if the prisoners weren't even there. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the transmitter switch. Orders were clear, but so was the truth. If we opened fire, those people wouldn't survive. I looked at my Marines. Vasquez's eyes darted to me, waiting. Taylor's jaw clenched, fear written in the set of his shoulders. Jensen whispered under his breath, "Say it, Captain." This was the moment, the test. I exhaled slow, hold fire. Repeat, Captain, command's voice sharpened. Hold fire. There was a pause, silence heavy enough to suffocate. Then the line went cold. The convoy inched forward, guards scanning, unaware of the eyes locked on them from the rocks above. My mind raced. Prisoners changed everything. We couldn't take the convoy head-on. not without killing the very lives we were sworn to protect. I whispered fast, sharp. Vasquez, flank wide, cut off their exit. Jensen, cover left. Taylor, eyes on those prisoners. We don't shoot unless we have no other choice. They moved without hesitation, trusting me, believing I saw something they couldn't. The convoy slowed again at a bend in the road, boxed in by cliffs. Vasquez signaled, position secured. I rose from cover, weapon drawn, voice like steel. United States Marines, drop your weapons. The desert exploded in chaos. Guards shouted, rifles lifting. My unit held steady, guns leveled, hearts pounding. For a breathless second it hung, violence ready to ignite. Then the lead guard made his choice. He dropped his rifle. One by one, the others followed, steel clattering against stone. I signaled Taylor forward. He sprinted, cutting restraints, pulling the blindfolds off wide, terrified eyes. Civilians, shaken, alive. We secured the convoy, cuffed the guards, and transmitted our coordinates. Within minutes, extraction hummed overhead, rotors chopping the air. As the dust whipped around us, I felt my knees nearly buckle, not from exhaustion, from relief. Later, back at base, command's words came sharp over the speaker. Captain Hale, you disregarded direct orders. You held fire when engagement was authorized. Explain. I stood at attention, spine straight, voice steady. Because orders didn't account for prisoners, sir. And my mission isn't numbers on a page. My mission is lives. Silence stretched, then finally noted. The line cut. I turned to find my Marines watching me. Vasquez grinning, Jensen clapping me on the shoulder, Taylor whispering, "We brought them home." And in that moment, I realized something. My family had never understood me, they had never seen my worth. But these Marines, they did. Not because I shouted for it, not because I demanded it, but because I proved it, quietly, in the choices that mattered. And for the first time, I felt it deep in my bones. I wasn't nobody. I was their captain. What do you do when the price of doing the right thing feels heavier than the wrong one? The after-action report landed on my desk with a thud. A thin folder, but the weight of it pressed harder than steel. Disobeying a direct order wasn't a small blemish. It was the kind of mark that could end a career. I flipped it open. The language was clinical. Captain Hale exercised unauthorized discretion, deviation from engagement protocol, subjective judgment compromised chain of command. Compromised. That word burned like acid. But further down, tucked in the official language, was a single line that kept me breathing. All civilians recovered alive. No casualties sustained. I closed the file, pressing my palm against the cover, and let the silence settle. Sometimes silence hurts more than reprimands. That evening, command summoned me. The room smelled faintly of dust and burnt coffee, the kind of place where futures were decided by men who'd never touched the dirt of the missions they wrote. A colonel leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp. "Captain Hale, you were ordered to engage, you didn't." I stood at attention, voice steady. "Because the engagement would have killed civilians, sir." He studied me. The room felt smaller with every second. Finally, he said, "Your lucky results matched your gamble. One mistake and we'd be burying Marines and hostages alike." I held his gaze. "It wasn't a gamble, sir, it was judgment. That's what you train us for." His jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he tapped the file with 2 fingers. "Don't mistake a good outcome for validation. Next time, follow the damn orders." Dismissed. I walked out, boots striking against tile, back straight. Inside, though, the ache spread wider. Back at the barracks, the unit waited. Jensen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, grin tugging at his mouth. "What they say, medal or firing squad?" The others laughed, tension bleeding into relief. "Neither," I said flatly, but my lips softened into the hint of a smile. "We've got more training at 500. Groans erupted, but beneath them was something steadier. Respect, Trust. They knew I had stood against orders for them for the lives they protected. That mattered more than medals. Later, alone in my quarters, the silence returned. The kind that wrapped around you like a second skin. I tried to let the rhythm of the bass soothe me, but then the screen of my laptop blinked alive. Another email, Avery. This one was longer, pages. Morgan, I don't know where to start. I know you hate me. Maybe you should, but I need you to understand I was blind. Dimitri was everything our parents wanted for me, and I thought if I could just hold on to him, maybe they'd love me more. Maybe they'd stop comparing us. You weren't invisible to me, you were my competition. And I hated that you never seemed to care about their approval. I hated that you had your own world I couldn't touch. Now it feels like I've lost everything. Please. Don't let me lose you too. I stared at the words, my throat tightening. For years I had wanted this. Not the apology, no, just acknowledgement, proof that she had seen me, proof that I had mattered. And yet, reading it now, I felt nothing but exhaustion. She wanted me back in her orbit, back in the cycle of pain and comparison. But I had walked too far into another life. A life where worth wasn't something handed down by family like scraps, but built through blood, sweat, and choices. I closed the laptop without replying. The next day, training hit harder. I pushed my unit past their limits, hills until their legs shook, obstacle courses until their lungs screamed. They cursed under their breath, but they never stopped. And when the last man crossed the line, collapsing in the dirt, I felt something swell in my chest. Not pride, not exactly, something quieter, belonging. But leadership isn't just drills. It's the choices in the quiet moments, the ones no one sees. That night Taylor knocked on my door. His face was pale, his hands fidgeting. "Ma'am," he started, hesitant, "can I talk to you off record?" I nodded, motioning him in. He sat stiff, eyes darting. "I froze yesterday when I saw the convoy. I aimed, but my hands shook. If you hadn't given the order to hold fire, I don't think I could have pulled the trigger anyway." His confession cracked with shame. I leaned forward, voice soft. "Taylor, fear isn't weakness, it's awareness. What matters is whether you let it own you. You didn't break, you stayed, that's what counts." He swallowed, eyes wet. "But what if next time?" "There's always a next time," I cut in, "and you'll be stronger because of this one." He nodded slowly, some of the tension loosening from his shoulders. When he left, I sat back, exhaling. It hit me then, the very words I had craved from my family I was giving to him, to all of them. The validation I had begged for in silence, I now offered freely because they deserved it. Weeks passed. Missions rotated, drills repeated, and every day the unit tightened into something sharper, something almost unbreakable. They weren't perfect, but they were ours. And yet the ghosts didn't vanish. One night I found myself back at the pier again, the ocean black beneath the stars. I ran until my lungs burned, until sweat soaked through my shirt. Still, her voice followed. "Nobody, Morgan, nobody." I stopped, gripping the railing, breath ragged. And I realized something in that moment, staring at the endless water. She was wrong. Not because I had proven myself, not because of medals or missions, but because I was here, still standing, still choosing. Nobody doesn't fight through silence. Nobody doesn't lead. Nobody doesn't endure. I closed my eyes, letting the salt air wash over me, and whispered into the night, "I am not nobody." The ocean didn't answer, but it didn't need to. How far are you willing to go for people who finally see you? The mission came down fast. No time for long briefings, no room for hesitation. Intelligence traced a weapons cache deep in a mountain pass, remote, fortified, crawling with guards who thought terrain made them untouchable. Our job, in, secure, out. Simple on paper, nothing simple in reality. I studied the satellite images under the glow of the operations tent. Cliffs jagged like teeth. Narrow roads, blind corners. A perfect kill box if you weren't careful. My Marines gathered around, eyes sharp but restless. "This isn't training," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of generators. "This is live. Every choice you make will matter. Every breath, every step. We move as one or we don't move at all. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," came the chorus, stronger than before, more certain. Still, I saw the nerves flicker in Taylor's eyes, the tension in Vasquez's jaw, the way Jensen cracked his knuckles like a drumbeat against fear. Hours later, under a moon smothered by clouds, we moved, boots whispering against dirt, packs heavy, weapons primed. The night pressed close, every shadow a threat. We reached the pass just before dawn. The cache was hidden inside a rock-carved bunker, guarded by sentries shifting restlessly in the cold. I signaled my unit into position, crouched behind jagged stone, every heartbeat thunder in my chest. Then too late I saw it. Tripwires, thin as hair, glinting faintly in the dim light, spread across the entry, layered like a spider's web. Ambush! I cursed it under my breath, holding up a fist. My Marines froze. We were too close. One wrong move and the pass would collapse into chaos. Command's voice crackled in my ear. "Hail, do you copy? Confirm status." I exhaled slowly. "Copy, sight is wired, possible ambush." "Engage anyway. Time-sensitive target, proceed." Engage anyway. As if those words erased reality. As if blind obedience could untangle wires set to kill us. I looked at my Marines, at Taylor's trembling hands, at Vasquez steady but waiting, at Jensen ready to follow me into hell if I asked. I whispered negative, adjusting approach. We crawled inch by inch, mapping the lines, marking each thread. Sweat slicked my palms even in the mountain chill. My heart hammered but my voice stayed calm. Then a shout. One of the guards spotted movement. Gunfire cracked, ricocheting against stone. My Marines dove for cover, dirt spraying around us. "Return fire," I barked. The night erupted. Bullets carved sparks from rock, shadows lunging as the guards swarmed. My rifle kicked against my shoulder, each shot measured, precise. The world narrowed to survival. "Captain," Vasquez's voice cut through, "Taylor's hit." My stomach dropped. I turned. Taylor lay on the ground, clutching his leg, blood seeping through his uniform. His rifle slipped from his grasp. "Cover me," I shouted, breaking from cover. Bullets shredded the dirt around me as I slid to Taylor's side. His face was pale, his breath ragged. "Stay with me," I hissed, pressing a bandage against the wound, tightening the tourniquet with shaking hands. "You're not done yet." "Cap," he rasped, eyes wet with pain. I froze again. "Shut up and breathe," I snapped, my throat tightening. "You're not nobody, Taylor, not here, not with me." His eyes flickered, the words sinking even through the haze of pain. We dragged him behind cover, Vasquez laying down fire, Jensen roaring as he cut through the advancing guards. For a moment, it felt like we might hold. Then I saw it, a guard sprinting toward the tripwire, a desperate ploy. If he reached it, the whole pass would blow. Rocks would bury us alive. There was no time to shout, no time to think. My rifle snapped up, my breath caught, and I fired. The guard dropped inches from the wire. Silence followed, sharp and sudden. The remaining sentries hesitated, eyes wide. In that heartbeat, Vasquez and Jensen surged forward, securing the bunker, weapons trained. The mountain stilled. Extraction came with the rising sun, rotors whipping dust into golden haze. Taylor was lifted onto the bird, pale but alive, his hand gripping mine weakly before they pulled him aboard. Back at base, reports would spin this as success. Cache secured, minimal injuries, target neutralized. But for me, it was something else. A line crossed. A choice made not for orders, not for command's demands, but for the lives in my hands. That night, exhausted and raw, I returned to my quarters. My uniform was still stained with Taylor's blood. My hands shook as I peeled it off. The laptop blinked again. Another email, Avery. This one short. "Morgan, I saw the news. They called you a hero. I don't know how to reach you anymore. Please let me try." I stared at the words, my throat tight. Hero. That word tasted bitter. Heroes don't hesitate. Heroes don't question. Heroes don't carry ghosts into every mission. But my Marines, they didn't need a hero. They needed someone who stayed when orders made no sense. Someone who carried them out, no matter the cost. I closed the email without replying. Because the truth had settled deep inside me, unshakable now. Avery could beg, command could reprimand, the world could call me whatever it wanted. But I knew who I was. I was not invisible, I was not nobody. I was the one who stood in the line of fire and didn't break. I was their captain. How do you face the person who tried to erase you, when now they can't look away? Weeks after the mountain pass, the base finally slowed. Missions rotated out, reports filed, gear cleaned until it gleamed. My Marines dispersed for downtime, laughter drifting across the yard. But even in the lull, I couldn't rest. The silence weighed different now, less of a wound, more of a scar. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in amber, a visitor's badge waited for me at the front desk. The guard's voice was hesitant. "She says she's your sister." My chest tightened. For a second I almost turned away, but then I walked in. Avery sat in the waiting area, her once polished glow dulled. No diamond dripping from her hand. No cameras chasing her smile. Just a woman stripped bare by the wreckage of choices she couldn't undo. When her eyes lifted to mine, they brimmed with something I had never seen in her before: hesitation. "Morgan," she whispered, her voice cracked, "you look different." I stayed standing, boots planted, arms folded. Different from what? The nobody you remember. She flinched. The words cut sharper now that they bounced back on her. "I didn't mean it," she said quickly. "Not the way it sounded. I was jealous. Angry. I thought if I tore you down, maybe they'd love me more." Her voice trembled, unraveling. "You were always stronger. You didn't need them. I did." I stared at her, silent, stretching. For years I had begged for this moment, an apology, an acknowledgement, proof that she had seen me. But standing here now, I realized something. Her words didn't heal. They didn't undo the nights of being ignored, the dinners where my victories were swallowed whole by her spotlight. They didn't change the ache of being called nobody in front of strangers. She reached forward, hands trembling. "Please, Morgan, I want my sister back." I didn't move. Because I finally understood, she wasn't asking for me. She was asking for the version of me that stayed silent, that folded smaller to fit her shine. That girl was gone. "I'm not the sister you remember," I said quietly. "And I'm not coming back to that house, to that silence, to being invisible." Tears streaked her face, her mascara smudged like it had been on her wedding night when the illusion cracked. "Then what are you?" she asked, voice breaking. I took a long breath, feeling the weight of years lift from my chest. "I'm a Marine. I'm a leader. I'm someone who doesn't need your approval or anyone's to know her worth." She covered her face, sobbing. For once I didn't reach out. I let the silence sit. Because sometimes silence isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only boundary strong enough to hold. Hours later, I found myself back at the pier. The night air was sharp, the waves breaking steady against the wood. My footsteps echoed, the cadence of someone no longer running from ghosts but walking with them. I leaned against the rail, staring out at the horizon where sea met sky. For years, I had been told value was something given, something granted by applause, recognition, or love withheld. But I knew better now. Value isn't given. It's built in the quiet choices, in the moments no one sees, in the refusal to bend when the world demands you shrink. I thought of Taylor, alive because I had held the line, of Vasquez and Jensen, stronger because I had pushed them past doubt, of the unit who trusted me without hesitation, my chosen family. And I thought of Avery, broken in the waiting room, still chasing love she'd never find in the reflection of others. I let the salt air fill my lungs, let the silence wrap me, not as a cage but as armor. Because dignity doesn't beg, dignity doesn't shout. Dignity simply acts. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can ever say is nothing at all. I turned from the water, my boots striking steady against the boards, carrying me back to the place I belonged. Not to the shadows, not to the past, but forward. Always forward.